Hello, world history students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have some notes for ancient Greece from chapter 5, and we're going to talk about Sparta. So, you have an addition to your notes here that follows section 1, a little bit before section 2. This is where we're going to be putting down our information. When we talk about Sparta, nothing in Sparta was more important than service to your city state through being a well disciplined soldier. Nearly from birth, Spartan life centered around the notion of the army and its discipline, and young boys were expected to leave home around age 7 and live in barracks until they were roughly the age of 30, which seems like an awfully long time. But when we talk about training some of the most ferocious soldiers, certainly this was kind of the method that seemed to produce some of the best soldiers of the era. These years were spent training for military service, and boys and young men regularly exercised, practiced with weapons, and hunted. Spartan discipline was tough, and boys were not allowed to speak without permission, and they were not fed so well in order that boys would learn how to steal food without being caught. In other words, by being really strict and not necessarily giving them lots and lots of food, you might develop this a little more aggressive personality that would be willing to go out and fight and be somewhat cunning so that they could survive. At the age of 20, Spartan men joined a regular military service, although their training was not considered finished. Men of that age could marry, but they could not live with their spouse. In other words, they could not live with their wives. They had to still live in a common barracks, and they would do so for a number of years, even after they got married. Women in Sparta were also supposed to endure some rigorous training. They were not expected to fight, but they were to remain strong and fit so that they could bear children. The greatest honor a woman could bear to her city-state was to bear a healthy child. In fact, only the women who died in childbirth had their names placed on grave markers as to honor their sacrifice. To keep healthy, Spartan women, for the most part, exercised vigorously, very similar to the men, and sometimes they worked out alongside of the men. The sacrifice of army life continued for another 10 years for our men. Soldiers ate in a common mess or a cafeteria or a mess hall or their meal. Their food was legendary for being bad tasting. The basic Spartan meal consisted of black broth or soup that was made from pork boiled in blood, salt, and vinegar. So not necessarily something that probably would be all that desirable to eat. By the time that a soldier was age 30, their training was considered complete, and Spartan soldiers could return to their homes and live with their wives. Their service, though, would continue until they reached the age of 60. There we go. Which, if you think about it in terms of lifespan for that era of time, 60 would be definitely considered to be elderly, very, very old age. Thank you very much.